music, isn't it? Has it sent you to sleep? Don't worry, I'll do my best too. I remember I was preaching once in a little church in Essex, and this guy, he prayed something during the meeting that really touched me, and I said, as Mark said in his prayer, and the mention of the name woke him up, and he was looking around wondering where he was and what was going on. Well, who do you find it hard to say no to? Now, I find it hard saying no anyway. I mean, this guy I can't say no to. This is one of my grandchildren. It's my youngest grandson. I can't say no to any of them, actually. I did once when Addie said, can I put one of your records on? And that was the only time I think I said no. I remember being in the car with Addie once, taking her back from school. She said, can we buy some toys? And I said, well, have you got any money? And she said, no, but you have. Maybe it's a pet. I was going to show that clip, that's actually from Shrek, and it went on to be Puss in Boots when he says, how can you say no to this? Oh, actually, I find it difficult to say no to these guys. Do you know who they are? That's Simon and Maria, who work at Tall Bird Record Shop. But, I might just go in there just to buy some record cleaning fluid, and, they'll say, have you seen this album? It's really good. It's a really good price. We've only got a few copies of it as well, and it's limited edition. And I come out with a stack of records. I don't know how it happens. It's not easy to say no. But do you know who the most difficult person to say no to is? It's yourself. And we're going to come back to that shortly. Now, we're back in our series, This is the Way. We're recapturing what it is to follow Jesus. And last week we were wrestling with a tension, and we'll be wrestling with this tension next week, because this is at the heart of discipleship. We can believe in Jesus. We can have it all up here. Yeah, I believe that Jesus exists. I believe he died for my sins. I believe he called me to follow him. But we can believe in him but not follow in his way. Because actually faith is a journey. And I gave you some stages of the journey. The first stage is when you're curious. And I'm sure some of you here today have come and you're curious. You want to know more. And that's great. I don't want to rush you through that. There's questions. There's issues. There's things that you're wrestling with. And then the next stage is that you're convinced. Yeah, I really believe this is true. I came to that stage, before I became a Christian, I really believed it was true. But I hadn't yet come to the next stage, which is to be committed to Jesus. You can be convinced of something, but not committed. When I'm convinced that park runs are really good for your health, but I'm not committed, I'm going to leave it to Helen. I'm just going to look at her pictures of Facebook and kind of think, I'm with you there in spirit, and think, well, that's my bit, You can be convinced, but not committed. But, there's another stage as well, which actually happens repeatedly, because we can crash. And I want to encourage you this morning, because sometimes when we look at a subject like discipleship, we can feel a bit of a failure, because we've crashed this week, or we've had a period in which we just haven't been in the right place. It is a natural path in discipleship. And you look in the Gospels, actually, one of Jesus' closest disciples crashed big time, and of course that was Peter. But there's another stage that I've added to that, and that's to continue. Once you've crashed, what do? Get up, get on, and continue. And that's what I want to encourage you to do today. Now, I think you'll find it helpful if you identify which stage you're at, and be honest with yourself. If you've crashed, be honest with yourself. And don't feel bad or guilty about it. The first step in moving on is actually to face up where you are, so you know where you need to go. And then stick with me as I help you make the next steps on that journey of discipleship. Now, if you're not a Jesus follower, I want to help you understand what following Jesus is all about. We've all had those salesmen come round our house, haven't we, to try and sell us double glazing. I've learned not to let them in. But you know what it's like when you get them in, and they'll give you a price, and it's usually, way overinflated price, and they'll say, hang on a minute. And they'll ring up and say, Charlie, I've got something. I really like these people. They're usually from Essex, actually, the real rogues. I really like these people. Can we give them a discount? Oh, Charlie says you can have it half price. Oh, I'll tell you what, actually, I'll throw something else in. We'll do the windows for 500, And the downstairs windows for 500 and the upstairs ones can be free. So it's all part of the price, and it's all pulling the wool over your eyes. Well, what I want to assure you is we're not like that. We're not kind of telling you half the story and luring you in, because Jesus was pretty straight about what it was to follow him. And so were the first Christians who spread the good news. And if you're a Jesus follower, I hope you're going to find this helpful to see actually we need to keep following Jesus, because sometimes it becomes just such a way of life, such a big part of our DNA. Actually, we forget what it really is to follow Jesus. We go through the motions. Now, last week, I said something that sounded a bit shocking, and that was that there weren't any Christians at the beginning of Christianity. That sounds a contradiction in terms, but there weren't any Christians. I'll tell you why. It's because the term Christian was one that was given to them. They didn't choose it for themselves. It was given. They belong to Christ. They're the party of Christ. It was just a way of describing them. Rather like in the 1960s, if you can remember them. If you were there in the 1960s, you probably can't remember it because, anyway, that's another issue. But, in the 1960s, we used to be called Jesus freaks. I used to be called a Jesus. I quite like that, a Jesus freak. It sounded better than a Christian. It was a name that was given to them. They had their own name for themselves. They were followers of the way. In fact, one of the leading early Christians, Paul, who went around starting churches all over the place and he went right into Malta, he was actually brought to court because the religious leaders didn't like what he was doing. And he said, I'm a follower of the way. And it's completely consistent with what God has done. You'll find that in Acts 24. And they were followers of the way because it was a whole way of life. It was Jesus' way. Following Jesus isn't part of our life, it's a way of life. And as we saw, the good news is it's not something that we do by our own efforts. Jesus, before he went to the cross, he took some time aside with his disciples and he said, I'm going to leave you soon, but the Father's going to send a helper, the Holy Spirit, who's going to come alongside you and be with you as I am with you. Because, there's a crucial part of Christian teaching is that God is one, but God is in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And he sends us the Holy Spirit, who is Jesus with us, who is with us all the time and is in our hearts and lives and comes alongside us and helps us. So what is a disciple? Well, a disciple actually means an apprentice. And an apprentice is more than a student. A student absorbs his teacher's ideas. But an apprentice replicates the whole way of life. His goal is to be just like his teacher or rabbi, as they'd be called in those days. And that's what Jesus was inviting his disciples to do when he first called them and said, come follow me and be my disciples. Come follow me in every way of life. And that's what he invites us to do as well. To be a disciple is to have a Jesus-shaped life. And Jesus shows us exactly what this life looked like. Because just after he invited Peter, James, John, Simon, and Andrew to follow him, he took them up to the mountainside and taught them. And it's what is known as the Sermon on the Mount, and you can read that through. It's a great read, but it actually teaches us what it is to live under Jesus' rule, how to follow Jesus. And at the end of it, there's a picture he gives us. Enter through the narrow gate, he says, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction. And many enter through it, but small is the gate, and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Yeah, you got two ways ahead of you, Jesus said. This broad way, this easy way, this comfortable way, or this narrow way. And he's not talking about being narrow-minded. He's saying, actually it's costly, it's difficult, it's not easy, it's not comfortable, but it's the way I'm calling you to go. Now, if you're like me, I'm not great at finding my way, I'm not great at directions, as you might know. So you might say, well, how do we find that narrow way? I don't know if you're like me, but if I ask for directions, I can't hold the information. I've just got limited brain capacity. Someone will say, well, go right down the road there, turn left at the junction, look for the King's Head pub, turn left, turn right. And actually, about 10 minutes later, I'm back where I started and I pull up and it's the same person. I say, can you tell me how to get to so-and-so, please? The best way for me is actually if you actually take me there and show me the way. And you know, the great thing is that's what Jesus did. He didn't just say, you know, this is the way. He said, I'm going to show you that way. I'm going to lead you in that way. I'm going to trailblaze. But it's not an easy route. Jesus said this later on in Matthew's Gospel, in Matthew 16. He said, from that time on, Jesus began telling his followers that he must go to Jerusalem. He explained that the Jewish elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of the law would make him suffer many things. And he told them that he must be killed. Then on the third day, he'd be raised to life. Now, one of Jesus' followers, Peter, didn't like that. Now, I'm fond of Peter. You know, I think if Peter was around today, he'd come from Essex, which is where I come from. You know, he just said it as it was. He was a straight-talking man, and he didn't like what he heard, and he wanted Jesus to know. Peter took Jesus aside and began to criticize him. Peter said, God save you from these things, Lord. These things will never happen to you. Now, let's not be too hard on Peter. He had the best intentions. He couldn't bear the thought of Jesus suffering in this way. Jesus, you've got this wrong. God wouldn't allow this to happen to you. He can't comprehend how this could possibly be part of God's plan, that Jesus would die, that humiliating death that the Romans had designed to insult the Jews and put fear into them. I mean, after all, Jesus was the new king that God had promised. He was going to rule forever, wasn't he? And that's what he was hoping. So Peter pushed back and told Jesus that he'd got this wrong, that it couldn't possibly be in God's plan. And he had a rather shocking response. Then Jesus said to Peter, "Go away from me, Satan. You are not helping me." Now, that's a pretty stinging rebuke. I mean, you try that if someone disagrees with you and say, "Get behind me, Satan." I did actually, when I was a young Christian, you just read something in the Bible, and I thought, well, that's good. And I was preaching in the open air. We had a little group where we were preaching in the open air, and this lady was being difficult, so I just said, "Get behind me, Satan." She didn't like it very much, as you can imagine. Why is Jesus being so hard on him? Well, because his death and resurrection was central to God's plan. And anyone who was trying to get him to sidestep that was doing the work of Satan. Now, you might not be a Jesus follower, and you might not know much about the Bible, and you might have sort of images of Satan, in red with a fork and all that kind of thing. And put all those things aside. And what I would say is, all you need to realize at the moment is that when Jesus talks about Satan, he is talking about God's adversary, God's opponent, the one who wanted to get Jesus off that path because he knew that Jesus was going to bring life and Jesus was going to rule, and this was God's way. Jesus had come to die, to rescue us, to conquer death, to bring us into a living relationship with God and establish God's kingdom. Peter hadn't grasped this. And as far as he's concerned, this is a no-go for Jesus to be carried, to take the cross upon himself. So he's unwittingly trying to pull Jesus away from God's path, which meant he's playing the role of Satan. See, Jesus isn't literally calling him Satan. He's saying, don't play the role of Satan. Don't be my adversary here. And after that shock is setting in, Jesus gets to the root of Peter's thinking. Then Jesus said to me, "Go away from me, Satan. You are not helping me. You don't care about the things of God. You only care about the things that men think are important." See, there's a contrast here. Jesus, God's Son, is concerned with what his Father wants. He has come to go God's way. He has come to put into practice God's plan, which is to die for our sins on the cross, conquer death, and bring us new life when we trust in him. Peter's concerned with what people want. You know, they wanted a king to rid them of the Romans. He wanted the path of least resistance. I mean, that's what we want as people, isn't it? We don't want hassle. Probably why I find it difficult to say no to my children and grandchildren. Do I want the hassle? Do I want the hassle of saying no? That's probably part of it all. So in direct response to Peter's ill-advised words, Jesus sets out his way. Now, this is the way I'm going, Peter, he says. Whoever wants to be my disciple, he says. This is the way. This is the way you all must follow. This is how you follow me in that way of the cross. Whoever makes the decision to follow me, whoever's going to have their life shaped around my way, must deny themselves. That's a pretty strong word in the original language. It's the same word that Peter used when he later denies Jesus 3 times, when he says he never had anything to do with him. It describes completely disassociating yourself from someone. Now, if you watch soap operas, I only watch EastEnders, the only one I watch, because I like the accents there, But I think, Whit and Zach are going to go their separate ways, And I think that she's going to say to him, "Get out my life. Get out my life." And actually that's the meaning of that. Get out of my life. I never want to see you again. That's the strength of it. Denying yourself is to say, I'm turning my back on what I want. It's a pretty strong thing. He's saying that we need to intentionally put his interests first and our own last. And we've got to do it firmly and strongly and deliberately. And that's not easy, because we naturally tend to focus on what's best for us. I know, of course, we probably think of our family as well. We think of our children, but let's be honest, it's me and my family that's first. If there's a big rush somewhere, I make sure, I've got my family around and we get there ahead of everyone else. If there's a big need, well, I make sure that my family are catered for first. That's just the way it is. That's what self does. No one has to teach us this. We just look at toddlers. The world revolves around them. I love watching toddlers play, and when there's a toy, and say one toddler, it belongs to them, but they're not playing with it. It's lying there, and they've got another friend round, and they see the friend pick that toy up. They want it. They haven't been playing with it, but they want it. It's my toy. It's my toy. It's one of the first words that toddlers learn, isn't it? It's mine. It's mine. I want it. And to be fair, they probably can't really think beyond themselves. Their life revolves around toys, food, sleep. If they don't wake you up at night, that's what it's like. That capacity comes later. But let's be honest with ourselves, it doesn't really change as we get older. Actually, it gets more intense, complicated, subtle, messier. Actually, the stakes increased. And our culture is built around self-gratification. We're bombarded by messages that say, you can have it now. You should have it now. You deserve it now. And that's what makes Jesus' way to say, I intentionally say no to everything I want and yes to everything Jesus wants, so countercultural. If you're going to follow him, you have to deny yourself. And let's be real about this. It's a tough call. In fact, we need to face up, firstly, to the fact that there is a self that needs to be denied. And we all like to think that we're nice people, don't we? That we're pleasant people and we put on the best side. But we're told by God, we're told in the Bible at heart, actually, that we're all basically selfish people. We look after our own interests and that of the families. It's God's work that changes us. It's a desires and wants and attractions. It's controlled by impulses that get us into trouble. It says in every circumstances and situation and relationship, I want my way. This, Jesus says, is what we need to deny. And he's not just talking about the parts of us that are bad. We need to surrender our desires, our dreams, and our hopes as well. We need to be saying to Jesus, if being your disciples means that I can no longer do the very thing I dream to be, maybe, an airline pilot or an astronaut or a rock star or, the extra member of Squid or whatever it is you want to do. If following you means I can't do these things, then so be it. I choose to follow you. If being a disciple means that I'm going to face rejection and scorn, I choose to follow you. If being a disciple means I'm going to face hardship and not live the life of comfort that I really want to live, I choose to follow you. There's no soft-soaping this. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, you're probably sitting there thinking, this is a tough call. Where's the door? I want out. Please, stay with me, stick with me. I would never want to pull the wool over your eyes. I would never want to pretend that it's easy. And you're probably asking me, is it worth it? Yeah, I asked myself the very same thing before I became a Christian. I was convinced. I was convinced of its truth, but it was the cost of it. It was the cost of being ridiculed by my friends and giving up some things I liked doing and stopping sniffing glue, which I was doing at the time. Never got into hard stuff, I'm glad to say, but I kind of like doing all this stuff. Did I want to face that cost? 45 years on, I can tell you that it is. But before I explain why it's worth it, I've got a bit more tough news to give you. Because Jesus is about to say something that's so shocking it would have knocked the disciples for six. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." That would have knocked their socks off, except they didn't wear socks in those days, because that was a common sight. If someone was carrying a cross, they were on the way to execution. He was basically saying, I want you to die. I want you to die to yourself and live for me. No other rabbi told their apprentice to take up a cross. But then no other rabbi was about to go to the cross themselves. That's why Jesus can look his followers in the eye and say this. And in the original language that this was written in, follow describes an ongoing process. That's why Luke's translation says, take up my cross daily. It's a daily thing. Daily, I have to make sure I pray from a surrendered heart and say, Lord, your will, not mine. Your will, not mine. It's not an easy thing to say. And actually, I don't always remember that during the day. So is it worth it? Well, it is. And Jesus tells us why. For whoever wants... We're not quite ready yet. So I said when it's the question, but I didn't tell him which question it was. I'll give you a wave. Jesus said, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. And when Jesus talks about saving life, he's describing the way that we cling on to our way of life, our position, money, and our possessions. If we consider life to be nothing more than the pursuit of pleasure and happiness, we'll lose the very life, the abundant life, the new life that Jesus came to bring. He's not threatening us here. He's saying that if we focus on our selfish desires, we'll lose the best, the fullest life. It'll slip through our fingers. You'll live, but you'll not be fully alive because you'll be dead to God. Now let's say, and you might have heard me use this picture before, but let's say I buy some flowers for my wife. And she says, what have you done? How many records you bought this time? What have you done to the car? And I no, these are just flowers. It's just flowers to say I love you. And she might say, they're very nice, but they're dead. What do you mean dead? They cost me 50 pence at Tesco's. That was the last time I bought flowers, you see. But she said, they'll go through all the motions of living, and I can put them in water and they'll live for a while, but they're dead. They're cut off from the source of life. And that's what Jesus means. You're dead without God. You're dead to God. You're not living the full life that I gave you. But if we stop grasping on to our desires, dreams, possession, and wealth, this happens. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. If we're determined to put Jesus first and ourselves last, we'll have that full life that Jesus gave us. That's why it's worth it. Now, as I come into land, I want to give you some practical examples of what it is to follow Jesus in this way, of what it is to say no to self and yes to Jesus. And we do tend to think of the big things, don't we? Normally, ministers, this is the time when I say, is God calling you to Cambodia? Or, is God calling you to Southend? Or somewhere like that? But actually, more often than not, it's daily decisions. And they actually build up. They build up so we're ready for the big things. This is what denying yourself, taking up your cross and following Jesus looks like in everyday life. I had a great example from Terry. He's given me permission to share this. Terry, a while back, was a victim of a crime. He was assaulted. And he's written a response to the police, and he said, I do not want to press charges because I'm a follower of Jesus and I forgive this man. That is amazing. That is what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus. That's going to have great effect. Yeah, and one day, mate, I'm praying we'll see one day, you'll see that guy in heaven and he'll say, do you know, that made me think. That totally made me think. But it's also things like deciding to spend time talking to someone who doesn't have much influence. When our own desire is to be with the influencers. We want to promote ourselves and get with the influencers and be with the in people. But actually, Jesus' way is, no, put that aside and spend time with the people I lead you to. Ministers' conferences that I've been to can be terrible, because people can just be looking for who they're networking. And there was one guy when I was quite a young minister about 100 years ago, and I was really looking forward to seeing this guy. I really respected him, and I could tell he was kind of listening a bit to me, but you could see his eyes were all over the place, looking for someone better to talk to. Oh, do tell me if I do that. Give people your attention. Or maybe it's giving money when you'd rather spend it on something you'd really want. Yeah, I was challenged actually by my granddaughter by something she did. But we took her to see Annie a few years ago at the Royal, and a mum gave her £10. Said, "Here's £10. Go and buy something really nice, and a program or some merch or an ice cream, or buy Grandma and Granddad an ice cream or something like that." That was the best option. And at the end of it, there was an appeal for a children's charity. I can well up when I think of it. And she said, "I want to put the £10 in." And I said, "Oh, look, I'll tell you what, I'll give you some change and use it for what your mum wanted you to do." She insisted, "No, I want to put it all in." Actually, that was a Jesus-shaped attitude. It was saying, no, I'm not going to spend it on what I want, but actually I'm going to do something else with it. Or maybe it's responding to someone who's been rude or horrible to you kindly when you'd rather knock their block off. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. I was preparing in the prayer day. I was in there preparing. I walked down the high street to the library, and I thought there's some people canvassing, and I thought it was a friend of mine there. So I walked over, and actually they were some kind of fringe right-wing group, and I thought, whoa, because I thought I was coming over to talk to them. I said, "Whoa, no way!" And they were rather rude. Now, what did I do? They were rather rude and disparaging of me. I thought it was my friend. Not that he's an extreme right. I thought it was my friend Kevin. You see, I was going, "Oh, hi, Kevin." Oh, it's not him. No. And I was kind of shocked that actually I was walking towards. So what did I do? Did I say, bless you, and walk away? I didn't actually. I said, "You're a load of loonies." Yeah. So and I went away thinking, what have I just been preparing? Shouldn't I have denied myself? So look, this is a work in progress. What I'm trying to say is we all fail on those things. Or it's speaking up about an injustice at work, even though that might damage your career prospects. But that's what Jesus wants you to do, because he cares about justice. Because he cares about things being done right, because you're part of his kingdom, and your boss won't like it, and your promotion might not happen, but that's the way forward. Or maybe treating someone with dignity, even though they might be a sandwich short of a picnic. Now, let me explain a bit about this. I'm one of these people who attracts unusual people. I don't know why. That's no reference to my wife, I should say. I had to work hard to attract her anyway. But you can guarantee on a tram, on a bus, someone will start coming and sort of saying strange things to me. And I was on tram one night, and this lady was sitting next to me and chatting. She looked quite compos mentis, and then she said, "Do you believe in angels?" I said, yeah, I'm a Christian, and God sent angels. And she said, "Oh, my angel's sitting next to you there." "Is he? Oh, right." And she told me exactly what he looked like and went into great detail. Now, you know what the human side of me wanted to do? I wanted to pretend I lived in Bulwell, and that's really desperate to pretend you live in Bulwell, isn't it, Or I wanted to go to the other side. I wanted to send a text to Hazel saying, "Ring me up quick to get me out of this conversation." But actually, I felt I just needed to stick with this conversation. Unfortunately, she was heading right to Hucknall. I hope she's not watching on. Better cut that bit out. But actually, I really felt it was important, actually, to deny myself, to say no to what I wanted to do, And actually, yes, and do it the Jesus way and give this person dignity. It's often little things like that. It's not always the big things like, being a missionary and becoming a martyr. Although, those things might happen. So I want to follow, these are the questions now. I want to finish with some questions. If you're not a Jesus follower, I want you to take these questions away with you. Where has the pursuit of my desires and dreams got me? Just go away and think about that. And then where would following Jesus take me? You might want to take a picture of that or ask me about it afterwards. But if you're a Jesus follower, what do I need to say no to? And what is Jesus asking me to say yes to? Either side that you're on, whether you're a Jesus follower or not, those questions will help you go the Jesus way. Because to be a disciple is to have a Jesus-shaped life. Follow me, Jesus said. But there's a cost. To put self behind, Jesus first, and obey him in every area of our life.